The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings, I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate -2694442.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the Science Department of the USS Dauntless. But before we get to that, let's do a bit of a recap. So we're talking about some pretty deep lore here. We're getting into the guts of the USS Dauntless. So I'd like to, for those who might be new here, just bring you up to speed on what the Dauntless is and what we're doing, why we're here, what are we talking about exactly. So quick recap. The USS Dauntless is a Star Trek fan club based in Cape Town, South Africa. We don't really like the word fan club, but it's inaccurate, but it's kind of incomplete. We're a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the largest Star Trek fan club in the world. And we are one of hundreds of chapters across dozens of countries. And our crew, who are members of our little organization, of our fan club, they are some of the thousands of members of Starfleet International worldwide. We are principally an online group. We exist on Discord, that is our primary hub of communications, but we also do things out in the real world. We have groups of members in a variety of cities across the planet, and those groups will get together from time to time and perform things called away missions, in-person gatherings in which we do all kinds of interesting things. So, Dauntless is an online Star Trek fan club, but we also have in-person events, so we are kind of a little bit of both online and in-person. If you want more information about what the Dauntless is, there is a briefing like this that goes into excruciating detail about all of it, and here it is. It's linked on our page. If you go to our website, you'll find the link on our YouTube page or Facebook page or wherever. You go to the sidebar, you go to About Us, you'll find this video here. What is the USS Dauntless? Goes into a lot of detail about what the Dauntless is and is not. But what you need to know for today's presentation is that we're a Star Trek fan club. We are real people who do things in the real world and also do things online. We are also not, although we use the name of a starship, the USS Dauntless, we're obviously not a real starship. There's no such thing as real starships. We just use that as an organizing metaphor for how we structure our little organization. And one of the structures that we've borrowed from the fictional Starfleet is that of departments. So each chapter, each starship, that's the metaphor we use there, are chapters of the organizational called starships. Each chapter or starship has groups of members on board that are dedicated to a specific set of tasks, different aspects of life aboard that chapter, and the Dauntless is no different. We have a number of departments, including the Science Department, which is one of the more important ones. Well, they're all important. So we're not a starship, we're not a real starship, we're a community of Star Trek fans, and that is the ship. The ship is not the actual starship, it is the crew. And the metaphor of the starship is to organize us. It's the sort of the conceptual framework that binds us together, as opposed to a real starship that flies through space made out of deuterium bulkheads or whatever. But the metaphor extends not only to the ship, but also to what we do. So like in Star Trek, the starships have missions. We also have a mission, and our mission is to bring the message of Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of humankind to the people of Africa and the Middle East. Well, who's Gene Roddenberry? This guy. He is the creator, the originator of the Star Trek franchise. He was the original executive producer on Star Trek, the original series, the I think animated series, the first few feature films, The Next Generation. He's the guy who got the ball rolling. And although Star Trek has since become a much larger institution than just Gene Roddenberry, he is the guy that we owe all of this to because he got it started. So, Gene Roddenberry is the guy. He had a dream, which is an optimistic vision of the future of humankind as depicted in Star Trek. It was what he imagined the world might become in the future, where we've used things like economic progress, technological and scientific development, and that kind of thing in order to solve most, if not all, of the problems that face humanity today. And so this future world is a virtual utopia. And we, as Starfleet officers, we undertake it as our personal mission to try and bring the world closer to that ideal as Gene Roddenberry envisioned it by doing various things. And one of the things that we do in order to try and achieve that is standing order number one. So our mission, our broad mission, has been broken down into 5 standing orders of varying levels of importance. Standing order, as you might expect, is one of the more important ones, and that is to promote Star Trek to our friends, families, and people around us. That's kind of important because we want to share the vision of Star Trek as we see it. And one of the ways we do that is by telling people about that vision so that they can also watch Star Trek and hopefully also become inspired in a similar way to the way that we have. So, promoting Star Trek is an important part of our mission, and that falls under standing order number one. And the science department is quite important when it comes to that part of our mission. How specifically? Well, in this point here, which is to, oh, sorry, this one here, which is to promote and represent Star Trek Online in person. No, that's not it. This one, there it is. Star Trek viewing events. That is the part of standing order number one that the science department is responsible for. And we'll get into more detail about what that means a little later. But just the point we're going to remember from here is that this is a very important aspect of what we do. And the science department is responsible for a significant portion of that. Science department also comes into play under standing order number 2, which is to encourage initiatives to help bring about the future envisioned in Star Trek, specifically when it comes to promoting science and critical thinking education. The science department is involved in that part of standing order number 2 as well. So those are both very important aspects of our mission, and the science department is critical to advancing both of those initiatives. So let's get into a bit more detail about the science department itself. What does it look like? Who are the people involved? What do they do? Let's start from the top, shall we? The science department manages functions relating to research and education. Sounds a little bit abstract, but we can go into more detail than that. Educational concerns include ongoing educational activities, Starfleet Academy courses. This needs updating. Starfleet Academy is the Starfleet International Internal Educational Facility, which is no longer called Starfleet Academy. With the advent of the new Star Trek series, Starfleet Academy, we've been requested to change the name of that institution. It's now called Starfleet Educational Services, but it's often referred to as the Academy in our old documentation. So that's going to be confusing for at least another 10 years. But Starfleet Academy, also known as Starfleet Educational Services, the courses offered therein, orientation and training content, and keeping track of academic qualifications of the crew. Research includes citizen science projects, study of popular culture, and the study of and discussion around Star Trek itself. That's quite important, as I mentioned, to our standing orders. We're going to look through the volunteer duty stations that fall under the science department in a moment. But first, let's look at the activities that the science department embarks upon. So the principal activities of the science department are, among other things, coordinating research projects, such as scheduling and facilitating Star Trek watch parties, study sessions, and quizzes. So this is a thing that we do fairly often. So whenever there is a new Star Trek episode, which is fairly often these days, typically that episode would be released during the week, usually on a Thursday by our calendar, South African Standard Time, but there can often be a delay through international distribution channels if those episodes are distributed through international channels. So we typically only are able to get our hands on a digital copy of that episode by that Friday. So what we do is we will usually schedule every Friday evening a watch party where we, as the crew of the Dauntless, can gather together and watch that week's episode of Star Trek together. It's quite important that we do that as an episode comes out so that we are up to speed on what's happening in the latest episodes of Star Trek. Even if you, as a member of the crew, haven't seen the rest of the Star Trek canon, most people haven't. So don't feel out of place. Most people have not seen most of the Star Trek canon, but being up to speed with what's new is fairly important and relevant. And when you're representing Star Trek and Starfleet to people outside of the organization, that's the Star Trek they're most likely to be familiar with. And that's what they're going to be asking you about, and that's what they're going to want to discuss with you. So keeping up to date on the latest Star Trek is quite important. And so to facilitate that awareness within the crew, we have these watch parties every week. So we can gather together here on Discord in a screening room channel, and we can watch the episode together and discuss it in real time as we're experiencing it for the first or maybe the second time. Some of us like to watch it on our own first before the screening, and then we'll watch it together together on our second viewing so that we can have a conversation about it afterwards. I do that. I'm sure plenty of others do that too. But it's important that we be able to watch that episode within the first 24 to 48 hours of the episode sort of coming into existence, so that we are not, firstly, left out of the loop, so that people are discussing Star Trek that we haven't yet encountered. And secondly, so that we are not exposed to spoilers on the internet. We don't want that. That ruins every fan's experience. And it's just a matter of, it's a factor of living on the internet now in this day and age, that any media that is more than about 48 hours old will be discussed openly in public social media channels, and there will be spoilers. So in order to avoid spoilers, in order to experience that narrative in its proper context, we make sure that we watch it together ourselves every Friday night here on Discord. On weeks when there are not new Star Trek episodes released, then we'll do other things like games nights or whatever. But it just so happens that this week, as I'm recording this, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 begins this Friday, so we'll be returning to our weekly schedule of watching new Star Trek episodes for at least the next 8 weeks, and then we'll see what happens after that. So, Star Trek watch parties every Friday. When there are new Star Trek feature films that are released in theaters, then that would also include a visit to that theater. So we would go all in uniform as a priority one event to our nearest theater and watch Star Trek out in public in a way that people can see us. That's quite an important aspect of representing the Star Trek milieu, the Star Trek brand, the Starfleet experience to the general public, is so that people can see us out in the world representing Starfleet and enjoying that stuff together. Ideally, we'd like to be able to get to some kind of private premieres or anything like that if we possibly can. That doesn't always work out that way. So even if it's just going to a public screening of the new Star Trek feature film, we would do that. It's been some time since that has been possible, though. I think the last Star Trek feature film to be released was Star Trek Beyond, which was about 8 years ago now. So that doesn't happen all that often these days, but who knows, it could happen again. For now, the majority of our new Star Trek watching experience happens here on Discord, so we can do it online. So it's all handled via streaming. Study sessions don't happen that often, at least not recently. We have done it in the past. So what happens is Starfleet Academy, or now Starfleet Educational Services, offers a variety, hundreds of courses, many of which are about Star Trek. So they might, for example, examine a specific episode from a particular angle, whether it's an astronomical angle or a biological angle or security or tactical or a historical or anything like that, or looking at the activities of a particular character. And then there would be a course about that specific aspect of that episode. So what we have done in the past is we've organized these study sessions where we will watch that old episode together, and then we will work together and complete that exam for the course for the educational services, so that we can all get that certification at one go. So not cheating, not collaborating on the exam as a whole, but we'll have an opportunity to watch the episode and discuss it and collaborate a little bit before we then go and write the exam on our respective screens. And then quizzes are a fun thing that we do from time to time. We actually had one last night, again, as I'm recording this. At the moment, once a month on a Wednesday, I think it's like the second or third Wednesday of the month, we gather together again here on Discord and we do a quiz of various different categories. This month we did starship spotting, so you have to identify what class of starship you're looking at. We also did species, so I presented an image of a character and you had to identify which species it was, and also a general category, which is the most challenging to create, where I try to link some kind of aspect of the real world, either historically or geography or scientifically or culturally, to an aspect of Star Trek, and then ask you a trivia question about that. And that is a lot of fun, and we like to do that. So those are the kinds of projects that would be done under the auspices of the science department. Now, I will often facilitate those activities myself, even though I'm not a member of the science department anymore. I used to be many years ago. I was once the Dauntless's chief science officer, but that hasn't been true for a very long time now. I do make myself available to the science department as a facilitator for some of these online events, because that's something I'm open to doing, and I enjoy it, and I think it's important that somebody do that. So, although I facilitate those myself, those activities typically don't fall under the command department, they fall under the science department. The next part of that is leading discussions on Star Trek studies. So this is something that happens, again, online primarily. We have a channel here on our Discord called Future History, which is kind of code, and it's something of an in-joke. If you cast your mind back to the early 2000s, there was a film called Galaxy Quest, which was kind of a loving parody of Star Trek of sorts, where there was, in this fictional universe, there was a sci-fi series not unlike Star Trek called Galaxy Quest. And the stars of that show were wrapped up with some fans, and then some aliens arrived who had picked up the transmissions of that show out into deep space and thought that it was all real. They call these old episodes the historical documents. So they thought that what was happening was the activities of this fictional starship were being recorded and then broadcast out so that everybody could see the history of the Galaxy Quest. And that was a fun idea. And so we use that joke when we're referring to Star Trek canon, that it is history of the future, that these are historical documents also that have been somehow beamed back in time to us so that we can see what's going to happen in the future. So that's where future history comes from. We are studying the history of the future. And that happens again in the Future History channel here on Discord, where we can discuss the Star Trek canon in a way that makes sense. Other research projects that don't relate to Star Trek are research missions like movie nights. So that can be, I mean, it can be to Star Trek movies, but as I said, that doesn't happen very often. They could be to any other kind of movie. If members of the crew are interested in watching a movie together, we can arrange an away mission to go and see that movie together, and that would fall under the science department. Nature walks, so just walking around looking at trees or bushes or animals or anything like that, that could fall under the science department. Star parties, so sitting in somebody's backyard with a telescope looking at the sky, that kind of thing would fall under the science department. Or public lectures, that's quite fun. We've done that from time to time as well, places like the Sibona Center in Johannesburg or the South African Astronomical Observatory here in Cape Town, where members of the crew can join together there and attend some public lectures usually about science, which is very interesting. So that obviously would then fall under the science department because that constitutes research. And then also promoting engagement in citizen science projects. This is something we haven't done very actively lately, but it's something that I have tasked the science department to get back on track on. We used to do this back in the day with the SETI at Home project. SETI is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And SETI at Home was an application that you could participate in their research from your own computer at home when you weren't even using your computer. So it was a screensaver you could download so that when you were not active at your computer, it would activate. And then the way that worked was the SETI project had telescopes pointing at the sky all the time. Whenever a telescope wasn't being actively used for another telescope project, then SETI could buy some time on the telescope, point it at an area of sky, and just record whatever the telescope could see, usually radio telescopes, so picking up radio transmissions. But they didn't have the computing power to be able to process all of that data themselves. So they created this network where all these users, such as us, could install that screensaver on our local computer, and they would send us a little parcel of that data that they collected from some or other telescope, and then they could use our computer that wasn't being used at the moment to process that data and then send it back. And it created a fun-looking screensaver, which was nice. We had a sort of a competitive leaderboard. We had a group in the system of SETI at Home so that we could keep track of who had donated the most computing cycles to the project. And that was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the project was shut down a few years ago. So we have been kind of adrift trying to find a replacement citizen science project that we can subscribe to as a crew and encourage participation in. But again, I've tasked the science department with finding a replacement citizen science project for us, and hopefully they'll be coming up with something soon. Looking forward to seeing what they arrive with. And then the other aspect of what the science department does is overseeing education and training. So we've done some education already, the study sessions, but there's more to it than that. So one of those is managing the linguistics challenge. We'll go into a bit more detail about the linguistics challenge later, but basically it's an ongoing challenge for the crew where we can learn languages, each studying on our own, and then compete through a gamified system online. They also track onboard certifications and courses. So there are, for any number of duty stations, I'll go into more detail about duty stations in a moment, but essentially they are positions on board that have a specific set of deliverables that are required for that member to commit to and to meet. For those kinds of positions, there are usually a list of qualifications that is required in order to obtain that position. And so it is the science department's duty to keep track of which crew members have obtained which certifications. Some of those certifications are administered here aboard the Dauntless by the science department. Some of them are administered by Starfleet Educational Services, and some of them are even offered by third-party institutions. Any of those qualifications that are relevant to specific aspects of the Dauntless, the science department maintains a qualifications matrix, which is like a spreadsheet listing everybody's relevant qualifications and checking off which ones they have. I'm not going to show that to you, obviously, because it contains personally identifying information, but you can imagine what that spreadsheet might look like. And it's the science department's function to oversee and manage that spreadsheet. Developing and maintaining course materials for onboard certifications. Again, we'll go into a bit more about this later, but there are some courses that we do here aboard the Dauntless that relate specifically to Dauntless activities, and it's the science department's job to manage that library of courses. They don't necessarily have to create every course themselves. Usually they would do so in collaboration with the onboard expert relating to the material of the course. So for example, with the new recruit orientation course, that would have been developed by the science department in collaboration with the recruiting officer so that the correct content is included in the course, but the science department would help to administer and keep track of members that are participating in that training course. And then there's also promoting engagement with Starfleet Educational Services and Starfleet Sciences. Interesting how I've updated this part of the website, but not this part. That's an interesting oversight. Anyway, but that is the correct name, Starfleet Educational Services and Starfleet Sciences. So Starfleet Sciences is an auxiliary within Starfleet, the International Fan Association Incorporated. Again, we'll go into a bit more about that a little later, but they are interested in promoting science largely internally within the organization of Starfleet International. And so it behooves the science department of the Dauntless to collaborate with them and make sure that they're on the same page when it comes to those kinds of projects. So now, who are the people of the science department? Who are the duty station holders? What are the duty stations? A couple more details that are relevant to mention here. So there are three branches of service aboard the USS Dauntless: Command, Sciences, and Operations. And under each one of those branches of service are a number of departments. The Sciences branch of service, as you can imagine, would include the Science Department. It also includes the Medical Department. So those are two different forms of science. We'll do the Medical Department in a different episode. But Sciences are the branch of service that the science department falls under. This is the specific insignia of the science department, and you can see that from the colors of this insignia, it includes some teal elements, and that tells you that the uniform color worn by the science department is teal. So when I say the uniform color, they wear a uniform not dissimilar to this one. This specific uniform is for admirals, but for most of the crew, they wear one that's kind of similar to this. It has similar sort of black and gray, but instead of having red on the collar and on the undershirt and on the sleeve stripe like this, the science department has the color teal, which is kind of a bluish green color. So science department wears teal uniforms, which is different to mine. All right, so who are the people? Here we go. So we've got at the top, the Chief Science Officer, and that position is currently occupied by Captain Johan van Kreunen, who unfortunately couldn't join us in this screening today. He usually does join us in these events in Discord, but he couldn't today because he's having internet connectivity issues in his office, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure he'll catch up later. While we're on the subject, by the way, if you are an active duty member of the crew, you are welcome to join us for these recordings in Discord, in the screening room channel on the Discord server. If you are not an active duty member of the Dauntless, you can join us on YouTube. We stream these live, or if you can't make it to our awkward recording time in the middle of the day on a Tuesday, you can always catch up after the fact. You can watch these videos on YouTube later, or on Facebook, on our Facebook page. You can find them there as well. But if you're active duty and you're available in the middle of the day on Tuesday, you're welcome to join us for these recording sessions, and hopefully I can address your comments and questions live on air. So Captain van Kreunen is not with us today, but he occupies this position, and there is his face. One of the duties of a department head is that you need to be comfortable with having your face on our material. So Captain van Kreunen accepted that burden when he accepted the position of Chief Science Officer. So what is the Chief Science Officer exactly? He is the department head for the science department of the USS Dauntless, as you might imagine. The department head acts as the communication conduit between the command department and the science department. The CSO is the curator of the Dauntless onboard library and educational services, educational resources, and manages the creation of certification courses. The Dauntless doesn't really have much of an onboard library at the moment, at least not outside of the educational resources, but insofar as we would have a library, for whatever reason, That would also fall to the Chief Science Officer to administer. This position may not be held by an enlisted member, so that's commissioned officers only. So what are the duties and qualifications of the Chief Science Officer? So under duties, we have curriculum oversight. So that is operating the certification program for the crew, which includes maintaining the certification library. So that is the documents that we've written for those courses, as well as the courses themselves. Working with relevant crew members to administer certification courses. So as I mentioned, those certification courses typically aren't created solely by the science department. They would belong to another specific officer or department on board. So for example, the recruiting officer would be responsible for the new recruit orientation course, or the chief operations officer would be responsible for the away team leaders orientation course, because those are relevant to those different departments. But the science officer's job is to work with those other stakeholders in creating and maintaining those courses. Working with relevant experts to produce new certification courses. Linguistics is another aspect of the job. So operating the Dauntless Linguistics Challenge for the crew. So that's acting as a moderator for the online platforms used to conduct the challenge. So we use a tool called Duolingo. I'll go into a bit more detail about that soon. And Discord is our communication channel where we discuss our progress in the linguistics challenge. So Duolingo and Discord are the two tools that are relevant to the challenge, and that's where where those things happen. The Chief Science Officer is also responsible for registering new participants in the challenge. Typically, they should be able to register themselves. New participants, by the way, would include only active duty members of the crew. But if you are active duty member of the crew, you can make your way to the Linguistics Challenge on the Dauntless Discord, find the relevant links and details you need in order to sign up for the challenge yourself. But if you get stuck, then the Chief Science Officer can assist you with that. Assisting participants with technical issues on those platforms. As with anything, these things sometimes get a little wonky, especially with the sign-up process for some reason. The tool that we use on Duolingo, the Duolingo Classroom platform, is notorious for not being clear about how you sign up for it. Once you get it up and running, it's usually fine, but getting on board can be a little bit tricky and confusing. So the Chief Science Officer would assist you with that. Tallying the monthly performance statistics and determining the monthly winner. That's relatively simple because the Duolingo Classroom platform largely does that for you, although the one complication might be that somebody would use a username on Duolingo that doesn't match up with their real name, and so it's the Chief Science Officer's job to untangle that spaghetti and figure out who is who. Also, at the moment, for example, we have a rolling over challenge. So it's based, the monthly winner is based not only on who has performed the best this month, but also a combined score of how well you performed over the previous 2 months. And there's kind of a rolling over winner. And it's the Chief Science Officer's duty and responsibility to manage that whole process. So it's a little more complicated than just who scored the most this month, but that's all in his plate. Announcing the monthly results of the challenge on or before the 3rd day of the following month. So at the end of the month, which is when all of the totals are complete, the CSO has a couple of days to figure out who the winner is and then make that announcement so that it can be incorporated into the crew evaluations report for the month, but also made available to the participants in the challenge so as not to keep us all waiting so we can see who won. Standard department head stuff here. We've got departmental supervision. The Chief Science Officer maintains open lines of communications with the members of the science department, which requires attempting to have at least one communications exchange with each member of the department per calendar month. Ideally, this would take the form of a crew report. Each member of the crew is expected to submit a monthly report detailing their various activities for the month. Failing that, just to have any kind of direct exchange, whether that's instant message or a face-to-face meeting or a phone conversation or anything like that, just to make sure that that person is alive and active and doing things. That would be the Chief Science Officer's job to initiate that exchange and to log the fact that that has happened. Reporting, so that's submitting the departmental monthly status report, which is the report that is submitted by each department every month to the executive officer. That information is then collated into the monthly status report for the chapter, which is passed up to Starfleet Command. More information about that reporting chain in a different video about reporting. You're welcome to go take a look at that. There's a lot to it, but this is the department head's part of that chain, that process. Then there is the Crow's Nest, which used to be our internal newsletter and is now a an update video series, kind of a news video series, and it's part of the department head's function to help generate content for that video update series. So if there is something interesting that's happening that's relevant to the crew that is coming from the science department's milieu, say for example, there's a Star Trek watch party in the next 24 hours, it would be the chief science officer's job to generate a little bit of content so that that can be handed over to the communications department to then create that crow's nest video for broadcast to the rest of the crew. Delegation means performing any and all duties that the Deputy Chief Science Officer is unable to perform. So the DCSO is the CSO's right-hand person and has their own job to do. But if they can't do it, then the Chief Science Officer would fill in the blanks, because ultimately all the work that happens within the science department rests on the shoulders of the Chief Science Officer. And it's his job to make sure that the people assigned to those duties do the work, and if not, make sure that the work gets done, even if that means doing it himself. Next is being an officer of the watch. So this is to monitor Dauntless communications channels during convenient hours and take swift action should any inappropriate content be posted or other issues arise. We have multiple communications channels, principally Discord, but we use other channels too, like Facebook groups and Discord. I say in not Discord. There's a Blizzard community and there's a Steam community and places like that. And we are all people, and sometimes people say things they shouldn't say, and so it is up to the officers of the watch to monitor those channels and see if anything was posted that shouldn't have been posted, take swift action, either remove the post or maybe have a conversation with the person that posted it. That doesn't happen very often, but it does from time to time. We're more likely to get a false alarm from one of our auto moderation tools saying that somebody has said a naughty word, but actually we kind of don't care about naughty words, so it's usually fine. But it's up to the officers of the watch to keep an eye on that kind of thing happening, so we can take a swift response if and when it becomes relevant. And then there's fleet operations, which is collaborating and coordinating with science communities within Region 8 and Starfleet International. So Region 8, I didn't cover this earlier, Region 8 is one of the 20 geographic regions that Starfleet International has divided the world up into. Specifically, Region 8 covers Africa and the Middle East, which naturally includes Cape Town, South Africa. So that's the region that we fall under. And there are institutions and members and organizations within Region 8 that facilitate science-related activities. And so it is up to our science department to coordinate with the Region 8 science people and make sure that we're all on the same page there, as well as Starfleet International, which is sort of the larger global parent organization. So Starfleet Sciences specifically is the auxiliary within Starfleet International that's tasked with doing that kind of work. So it's up to the science department, specifically the chief science officer, to keep those channels of communication open so that we are constantly working with them. Chief Science Officer reports to the Executive Officer, who's the second in command of the starship. And then we look at what the qualifications are that the Chief Science Officer needs to have in order to begin the process. So we have an induction process, and it's worth taking a look at the video that I did some time ago on the induction process. It's still largely accurate about how we appoint new duty station holders. In a nutshell, the duty station holder, or at least the applicant who is interested in holding a new duty station, will fill through an application form. The senior staff will evaluate their suitability based on the qualifications they already have, so how much of this list they've already completed. Nobody is expected to have completed all of these items on this list when they fill out that initial form. That was once the case, but it's not the case anymore. As much of this as possible, the senior staff will evaluate based on that criteria. Will then, if they are approved, we'll then move on to an interview where there'll be a couple of senior members of the crew will conduct an interview with the applicant. If they pass the interview, then they'll move on to the the prerequisites process. So some mentors on board will be assigned to assist the applicant in making sure that all of these items are checked off. Only once all of these items are checked off, then the applicant moves on to the training part of the program, where they will be taught how to complete the various tasks associated with the duty station in question. And once they've been assessed as being capable and confident in performing all of those tasks, only then are they assigned to the position. So that is the induction process. Goes into a lot more detail than that in the video, but that's it in a nutshell. But that's what these requirements are. So you don't need to have these requirements in order to fill in the form, but you will need to have these requirements checked off during the course of the induction process. And what are the requirements? So first of all, the applicant needs to be an active participant in a bare minimum of 50% of all Dauntless science activities measured over a 3-month time frame. So not all of the departments on board are involved in creating their own activities. So for example, we did a video on the operations department, and the ops department does almost no activities of its own. It's almost entirely a support department supporting other departments. So the activity requirement in ops is different. It includes 30% of all Dauntless activities across all departments. But because the science department engages in their own activities, we need to see that the applicant is actively engaged in this department. So 50% of all Dauntless science activities measured over a 3-month time frame. So that's Star Trek watch parties, that's scientific away missions, all of that kind of thing. It must include online and in-person activities, as well as the monthly challenges. So that includes the linguistics challenge and any other challenges that the science department might choose to engage in the future. The applicant must also be an active user of Discord and Trello. Should add to this list Duolingo. Discord, of course, is our online collaboration tool. Trello is a tool that is owned by the operations department, by which they are able to allocate tasks and duties to various other duty station holders. And as a member of the senior staff, the chief science officer needs to be an active user of Trello. And that the use of Trello would be included in their training towards this station. And then there are some certification requirements. So the applicant needs to hold the grade of O2, which is lieutenant, junior grade. Typically, by the time you've completed these other qualifications, you will be long past lieutenant junior grade, but just in case, that's where you need to be. You need to have completed the Officers Training School at Starfleet Educational Services, called the OTS, which means that you are then qualified to serve as a commissioned officer. You need to have completed the Starfleet Data Protection Policy exams. That's the SFDPP 101 and 102 at Starfleet Educational Services. What is this? Well, there are a number of international jurisdictions, South Africa being one of them, that have pretty strict data privacy laws. Here we call it POPIA. It has different names in different places. And the SFDPP is sort of an overarching privacy management certification offered by the Starfleet Educational Services that then qualifies Starfleet officers for handling personally identifying information on behalf of the institution. So as a senior officer, the chief science officer needs to be able to handle personally identifying information, so they need to be properly certified. So they'll need to be hold the SFDPP 101 and 102. Those are the two initial exams that you do when you first obtain that certification, but then there is an annual update to the exam, because this legislation is constantly being changed in various jurisdictions around the world, and so that course is being updated to reflect those changes every year. So every officer in the fleet who has that certification is required to write a catch-up exam annually in order to retain that SFDPP certification, myself included. So the chief science officer is required to do that too. There's also a Bridge Officer Certification Chief Science Officer offered by Starfleet Educational Services. This is less of a practical certification and more kind of a conceptual one. It goes into a lot of detail about what a science officer is in the fictional context of Star Trek, and how that metaphorical role maps onto our physical, practical version of it here aboard the Dauntless. So I think it's important to have that understanding of the conceptual metaphorical background, and the Bridge Officer Certification will certainly get you that. And then there is the new recruit orientation course, which is offered here aboard the Dauntless. It's almost a given that you would have completed that, but just in case you haven't, you need to make sure that that's locked away. You need to have an active membership to Starfleet in good standing. This is to ensure that you are actually able to keep your SFDPP certification up to date, because if you don't have a Starfleet membership, you can't take that exam, and that's not going to work. It also means you won't be able to participate in the various Starfleet forums where things like fleet operations take place. You won't be able to join the Region 8 Discord server. You won't be able to collaborate with Starfleet Sciences if you're not an active duty member. So not an active member of Starfleet in good standing. And then we need to have a correct and accurate standard duty uniform, the Class B uniform, the general officer's equivalent of what I'm wearing now. All senior staff are required to have an SDU. For junior staff, an easier and less expensive and less complicated uniform is acceptable, but for these senior positions, we are the leadership team of the USS Dauntless, and so it's imperative that we present ourselves in the most professional and coherent way possible, and that includes wearing the proper uniform, which is the Class B. Next item is to be obtained within 6 months of appointment to the position. The applicant should be completing the PD 100 certification through the Starfleet Marine Corps Academy, which now also has a new name, and I keep forgetting what that name is. But the PD 100 stands for the Level 1 Professional Development course, and in my opinion, is one of the best courses offered by Starfleet Educational Services. It covers all kinds of topics that relate to holding leadership positions within an institution like ours. So that is the Chief Science Officer. Those are his duties, plus plenty of other things that aren't necessarily listed here, but fall within the general sphere of influence of the Science Department, and therefore under the purview of the Chief Science Officer. But those, at least on paper, are what his duties entail. The second duty stationed aboard the Science Department is the Deputy Chief Science Officer, which is currently vacant. There's an important point I want to make here, which I should have mentioned in the previous video about the Operations Department, but it applies here as well. Just because the position is listed as vacant here doesn't mean that there isn't necessarily somebody somewhere on the Dauntless who is currently in the state of induction towards this position. As I mentioned, in that induction process, you're only taking that seat right at the end of the process. So technically, the seat is still vacant. It's part of our policy that we don't advertise when a member of the crew is involved in the induction process for a position, because we want to make sure that that crew member has the option to step back from the process at any time without losing face, without being embarrassed about it. So we keep that relatively private for the duration of the induction process, and only at the end, once they've achieved all the necessary qualifications, will they then receive that title. So all the way up until that end process of the induction course, which could take months or possibly years, hopefully not as long as that, but it could take many months for somebody to go through that whole process. The entire time, the position is listed as vacant. Other people are welcome to apply that position. If somebody were to apply for that position and there was an applicant in the induction process for that position, we would advise the applicant that that is the case, and they might need to join a waiting list or be encouraged to apply for a different duty station or something like that. So that if you are a member of the crew and you are in induction for this position, and you're wondering why I'm advertising it as vacant, that's the reason. It's not because you have been dropped out of the induction process necessarily. It just means that until you have completed the process, you don't actually occupy that seat. And so it is still technically vacant, even though we're not really accepting new applications for it at the moment. You are first in queue if you are already in the induction process. So what is the Deputy Chief Science Officer, who we currently don't have? Well, as you might imagine, they are the deputy department head for the science department, who acts as a reserve for the department head. So if the department head is busy or is not able to connect, or is not able to do a thing that they need to do, then the deputy chief science officer would step in and perform those duties. Unlike the department head, the deputy department head can be held by an enlisted member, in which case they would use a different title. It would then be the Chief Science Non-Commissioned Officer, or CSNCO. However, if we have a CSNCO, when the Chief Science Officer steps down or that position becomes vacant, when the normal Deputy Chief Science Officer would be automatically considered a replacement, or at least an applicant for that department head position, that does not apply to an enlisted member. An enlisted member cannot automatically assume that they're going to be entered into the consideration for that advancement unless they decide to become an officer. Right, so what are the duties and qualifications? Well, so you can kind of assume that all of these duties and requirements that the Chief Science Officer has to do would apply to the Deputy Chief Science Officer, because if the Chief Science Officer can't do that work, then the Deputy Chief would have to step up and fill in. But they're not specifically all listed here. What we have listed here is really the basic duties that apply to all deputy department heads. So that's departmental supervision, assisting the department head in having those interactions with each member of the crew every month, submitting the DMSR on behalf of the department head every month if necessary, and then performing any duties other duty stations within the science department are unable to perform. Now, there are currently no other duty stations in the science department, but that changes with time. We might decide to appoint ship's astronomer or something like that, or astrometrics officer or something like that. If we felt the need to do so, we could do that, in which case it would be up to the deputy chief science officer to ensure that that person's job is being done by either helping them do it or doing it for them if the need arises. So the deputy chief reports to the chief science officer, and the qualifications list is very similar. It's just kind of one step down. So there's still that active participant in 50% of all Dauntless science activities measured over a 3-month time frame. Here, in fact, these are all the same. The rank requirement is still lieutenant junior grade, officers training school, data protection policy, all that kind of thing. The only difference here is that this qualification here, the bridge officer certification for chief science officer, that is to be completed within 6 months of appointment. They don't need that in order to get through the prerequisites phase of the induction. So that's slightly different. Otherwise, it's the same. For the non-commissioned officer, the requirements there are slightly different. There is another difference here. The non-commissioned officer, for the deputy chief for the chief science non-commissioned officer, they are not required to have completed the data protection policy, which means that they would then not be able to handle any personally identifying information. So that would limit their duties there. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. What privileges are there? Upon appointment, the Deputy Chief Science Officer is granted a conditional promotion to the grade of 03 or Lieutenant. Again, if you've completed these requirements here, you're probably already a Lieutenant at minimum, probably a Lieutenant Commander. So that's kind of redundant, but that could happen. After holding the position for 6 continuous months, the promotion becomes permanent. When the Chief Science Officer position becomes vacant, the Deputy Chief Science Officer is automatically considered an applicant for the position, regardless of his or her qualifications. So you are automatically considered an applicant for that induction process to the department head. You are, of course, welcome to refuse it if you don't want that promotion, but you are considered at least an applicant, and we would typically kick off that induction process right away if that position became available. The DC-NCO does not go through that process. All right, so those are the duty stations within the science department. The science department is one of the departments that accepts standard positions. So what is a standard position? That is what most of the crew is. These are members of the crew who are active duty. They're actively involved in participating in Dauntless activities, but they are not, for whatever reason, prepared to commit to a set of deliverables. So these kinds of duties that these duty stations are assigned to, standard position holders, for whatever reason, have opted not to commit to those kinds of deliverables and instead choose to contribute in a more kind of fluid and ad hoc way, which is a valid choice. We hope that everybody would eventually choose to become a duty station holder, but that doesn't work out for everybody, and so standard positions are there as well. So if you are interested in holding a standard position within the science department, you may do so. You'll just get a generic title like science officer or science laboratory technician or something like that. I think that's the title we're using at the moment. Or science technician, that's probably what it is. Science technician if you're an enlisted personnel. And then you can contribute to the projects of the science department in whatever way you see fit on an ad hoc basis, which is acceptable if that's how you choose to do it. All right, so let's look at the programs and initiatives. We've mentioned most of these already, but we can look through what they kind of look like. So first up is studying Star Trek. So what does that look like? So we have the watch parties, and they happen here in Discord in the same channel in the screening room. So it looks kind of like this. We've got our next one scheduled for this Friday, and this is the first episode of Lower Deck Season 5. Excuse me, my non-humanoid companion is demanding my attention. I was going to let him out. There we go. So what does that look like? We gather together here in the Dauntless Discord in the screening room channel at 1900 hours, and we enjoy the new episode together. We will stream it here, and we will have a discussion about it in real time. All you need is your either workstation, which is your desktop or laptop computer, or a pad, which is your phone or tablet, and then you can join us. As long as you're an active duty member of the crew, you can participate like that. So these are most Fridays, except when there are no new episodes that week. Obviously, then we'll do something different in that time slot. So that's where that happens. Then we also have the daily devotionals, and they, as I mentioned, happen here in the Future History channel. Oh, I haven't actually told you about the daily devotionals. So what that is. This is a project that it's a personal project that I do, but it's my gift, as it were, to the science department that I contribute this. I feel like it is important to watch the Star Trek canon. So the Star Trek canon is all of the Star Trek film and TV series. So that's every single episode, whether it's live action or animated. with the exception of the very short treks. Those are explicitly and deliberately non-canon. Everything else is canon, so that's the original series, animated series, all 13 films, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Picard. Have I missed any? Prodigy. So that is the entirety of canon, so that's close to 1,000 episodes. I feel like it's important to watch those over and over again so that we can learn more things from it. But then, how do we watch them? I think that it's beneficial to watch them in chronological order. So from beginning to end, the oldest episode, chronologically speaking, within the context of the fictional universe, all the way to the latest episode. So the first episode, chronologically speaking, is it's the final episode of Star Trek: The Original Series, Season 2. It's called Operation Assignment Earth. The entire episode is set in 1968, so that's where we start. Then we jump ahead to Star Trek Enterprise, which is set in the mid 22nd century. Then we jump ahead again to Discovery, then Strange New Worlds, original series, and so on, all through those in chronological order, all the way through to the final episode, chronologically speaking, which is Short Trek's Calypso, which is set somewhere in the 42nd or 43rd century. We don't have an exact date. So all of those episodes in chronological sequence. There is no definitive chronological sequence for the Star Trek canon, so I've devised a system that I think kind of makes sense for me, and that's the order in which I sequence it. And then all of those episodes are listed in that chronological order in a Google Calendar, which any member of the crew is welcome to add to their personal Google Calendar. But also each episode is assigned to a day, and the episode for the day is posted here automatically in the Future History channel. So today's episode is Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 4, Episode 5, Empathological Fallacies. There's a link here to the Memory Alpha page on that episode. Memory Alpha is the Star Trek fan wiki, which is arguably the most useful resource for online information about Star Trek. And then if we choose to, we can have a conversation about that episode here in the Future History channel. Some people are happy to just look here and treat this as a reminder. Some people like to get involved in discussing the issues of the episode. That is up to you. But this is a resource that's available to everybody so that we can all be going through the entire canon over and over again, watch all those episodes that we've only seen or we haven't seen yet, or maybe only seen once or twice, watching them again with fresh eyes, with fresh new context, because of course there are close to 1,000 episodes and we're watching an episode a day. It takes over 3 years to work through the entire Star Trek canon. And at a time where we are now, where there are constantly new episodes being added, when we come around to that same part of the Star Trek canon again, chronologically speaking, there's now new content. So we now get to see new stuff in its chronological context, and that helps to shed new light on what that episode is telling us about this Star Trek fictional universe. So that's how we do the daily devotionals, and it happens here in the Future History channel and the Dauntless Discord. That's not the only thing that happens there. This is the place where we go to discuss Star Trek, but within that context is the daily devotional conversation. So that's the daily devotionals. Then we have the certification program, which is also administered by the science department. We currently have three onboard certificates. Yes, three onboard certifications that are live, that are ready to go. The first one is undergone by every new recruit who joins the Dauntless. It is a 5-day course called the New Recruit Orientation Course. Each day covers a specific, oh, here we go. Here we've got the daily breakdown. Day 1 is ranks and titles. Day 2 is departments and duty stations. Day 3 is uniforms. Day 4 is away teams and away missions. And day 5 is Starfleet International and the Academy. So once each new recruit has gone through all 5 days of this course, they are then qualified to serve as members of the crew, and they must then choose a place to serve. This test is usually administered by the recruiting officer, but the course is administered and monitored by the chief science officer as part of that program. And when the course is complete for a specific member of the crew, the chief science officer will open that qualification matrix spreadsheet and make a little check mark next to that person's name to record the fact that they have completed it. We'll also generate a certificate. For members who are away team leaders, so you are the ranking member in a specific sector, a city or a place in the world, and you are the highest ranking Dauntless crew member in that area, that means that you are an away team leader, and we have a separate 3-day orientation course for away team leaders. So once you've completed the new recruit orientation, if you're an away team leader, then the operations the chief operations officer will put you through the away team leaders orientation. So that's 3 days. The first one is what away teams are, then how to run away missions, then other duties of an away team leader. And once you've completed that, then you're ready to serve as an away team leader. Any member of the crew is welcome to complete the away team leaders orientation, by the way. You don't have to be an away team leader already in order to complete it. If you're interested in doing so, just drop the chief operations officer a message, and they can help run you through that if you like. There's a third one that is currently under development, and that is for the security department, so that our security personnel are equipped with the necessary tools and skills and information in order to serve within that department. This has been a project that has been under development for quite some time, and the project has stalled multiple occasions. It is currently stalled, but hopefully we'll have that live before too long. So those are the orientation courses that are currently on offer, or at least 2 on offer and 1 under development. And then we have protocol certifications. So there's currently only 1 of these, and that is for the onboarding protocol. And this is what happens when a new crew member joins the crew. So the new crew member is run through the new recruit orientation process, and it's kind of a bewildering process for that new recruit because there's just a lot of new stuff to take in. But there's also stuff that needs to happen from our side. So somebody on the Dauntless side needs to be processing that new member and assisting them going through that onboarding process. And that's what the onboarding protocol certification helps you do. It's probably out of date and probably needs some updating and some revision. And typically only these 4 crew members would be required to have this certification: the commanding officer, executive officer, second officer, and recruiting officer. Those are usually the only members who need to help new recruits get on board, but there's nothing stopping anybody else from completing the course. If you're interested in doing so, you can download the protocol document there and complete the exam there yourself. This also is managed by the science officer. So those are the certifications that the Dauntless themselves operate at the moment. Those 3 different certifications. There are a couple of others, but that are not science related. Those are different. We'll cover those on different video days. But those are the 3 that are part of that onboard certification process. So if you are interested in completing any of these, it's great. Even if you don't need them for your position, it wouldn't hurt to have them. It might look good on your CV if you ever decide to apply for a duty station in the future. Then we move on to the linguistics challenge. I've talked a little bit about this, and as I mentioned, it uses this tool called Duolingo. And the way it works is you sign up to Duolingo, you create your own Duolingo free account. Oh, in case you don't know what Duolingo is, it's a free tool that you can use to study languages. They've got dozens, hundreds possibly of languages on their database, and it's kind of a gamified tool where you go through these little lessons. You can just do as little as a couple of minutes a day, or do as much as you like. You can really hit it hard if you feel so inclined, and you earn XP, experience points, for the time that you spend using the application. And what we provide is a tool. We use their tool called Duolingo Classrooms, where we can create a leaderboard based on the activities of the members of our group. So if you are a user of Duolingo, you can go to the linguistics channel on the Dauntless Discord and sign up for our Duolingo classroom, and then you can see your progress as it compares to other members of the Dauntless. And then, as I mentioned, there is a monthly challenge where the Chief Science Officer will announce who has accrued the most XP for the month, experience points. And then there's also that 3-month rolling tally system that's going on at the moment as well, which is beneficial. And you can do any language you like. You don't have to do Klingon. Klingon is available. That's one of the languages on the system, but any language is acceptable. We don't currently limit on that basis. So if you'd like to learn French or German or Mandarin because you need it for work or just for fun, or you want to learn Japanese so that you can watch anime without the subtitles or whatever, that's perfectly acceptable. That all counts. But Klingon is always fun, and that's a cool party trick to be able to show people when they ask you about Star Trek. You can speak a bit of Klingon for them, and this will help you with the pronunciation. It's a great tool. So the next thing that Science Department operates, of course, we talked about the citizen science projects, but we don't currently have that ongoing at the moment, so I don't have anything to show you about that. We also have the study of popular culture, which I mentioned. So that falls under movie nights. So we call that the anthropology project. So although we are Star Trek fans, most of us are not blinkered and limited only to Star Trek and our interests. We usually will enjoy other science fiction and fantasy literature, as well as any other kinds of things like that. And there's no reason we can't enjoy those together. So we will, from time to time, organize away missions where we will go and watch movies together, typically things that are in that genre, and we will call those anthropology missions, because we are the metaphor we use for that is that we are Starfleet officers and we are studying the history and culture of the early 21st century. And so we're going to go and immerse ourselves in that popular culture by watching that movie and study it in that way. It's a little frivolous, but we like to have a thematic element to most of our activities. So movie nights, that falls under anthropology. We also have a channel on the Discord server where we can talk about that kind of thing, because why not? And then there is the aspect of working with Starfleet International. So Starfleet Sciences, as I mentioned, is the auxiliary that falls under Starfleet International. Starfleet International, the big parent organization, has a number of these auxiliary groups within it. So these are special interest groups that have earned a certain level of recognition within the institution. And there are sort of requirements they have to achieve in order to become fully recognized as auxiliaries, and Starfleet Sciences has done that. And they are interested in various specific things. We have Pet Fleet, we have the Marine Corps, and we've got various other auxiliaries, the Corps of Engineers. But today we're talking about Starfleet Sciences, which, as the name suggests, is a group interested in science and promoting science largely internally within the organization of Starfleet International. They will post science news, they'll post science memes, they'll sit and talk about science. And one of the interesting projects that they've been working very hard on lately is a thing called the Soul Speaker series. So here they've produced some content. So these are streamed lectures by some very interesting guest speakers. And this is done, I think it's monthly. Yes, it looks like it's monthly. It was one in October. I don't think that's upcoming anymore. I think that was last week's one. Next month we've got somebody who from the UK Space Command. The next month after that we've got our very own Fleet Captain Mitson from Pet Fleet, but he also is an astronomer, I believe, so he's going to talk about that. So there's some interesting topics coming up. The previous topics are also available, I think, on YouTube after a certain amount of time has passed. But if you are a member of Starfleet International in good standing, then you can join these speaker events live, and you can, I think, even ask questions and interact with the guest to a certain extent. So that is a fun thing to be involved with. So we have members of our crew who are interested in promoting that internally, and so they will do so. So that is what's happening in Starfleet Sciences, that and various other things. I think they have their own newsletter and various other activities in Starfleet Sciences. But to my mind anyway, the Soul Speaker series is the most interesting thing they're doing at the moment. So that's interesting. All right, so how do we get involved in the science department? So let's get back here again. So if you're an active duty member of the crew and you want to know how to get involved in the science department, there are principally two different ways of doing that. The first one is to sign up. You can join the science department either as a duty station holder or as a standard position holder and actually be a member of the science team. The other way is to, as a member of the rest of the crew, just get involved in activities that the science department operates. Most of the things that the science department does are for the benefit of the entire crew. So watch parties are for all of us. The daily devotionals are for all of us. Linguistics challenge are for all of us. So if you are involved in any of those projects, even if it's just as a participant, or you can get involved as some kind of facilitator or something like that if you wish to, then you are involved in promoting the science department. So you don't have to be a member of the science department. You don't have to be wearing a blue uniform to get involved. It's for all of us. So hopefully you are already engaging in various activities administered by the science department. In fact, you almost certainly are. But if you wish to, you can always step up your involvement and your engagement with that, even without having to switch to a blue uniform. But if you wanted to switch to a blue uniform, remember that the Deputy Chief Science Officer position is currently vacant. I think that's all the material I needed to cover. I'd like to just open the floor to questions and comments. Do we have any of those? Let me check the Discord. Let me greet everybody who's here. We've got Senior Chief Stuart Newton, we've got Lieutenant Commander Kendra Shamali, we've got Colonel Anya Hubert, and Master Chief Nicholas Kotzer. Good to see you all here today. I'm glad you could make it at this weird time, but you're usually the usual suspects who are here most of the time anyway. Um, Chief Newton, internet died momentarily. Yes, you dropped off for a little bit, but I'm glad to see that you're back. Colonel Hubert says, semi off topic, I have Star Trek reading material PDFs. Does that qualify for the library? Yes, that could. So if you would like to donate any kind of materials, whether it's digital or even physical materials to the Dauntless Library, please do so. So drop Captain Van Kroonen a message about that, and hopefully he'll be able to assist you in making that happen. Commander Shamali says, every time someone mentions the SFDPP, the little hairs in the back of my neck stand up. That qualification is somewhat traumatic. It's quite intensive, and it's by necessity. So the laws that govern the data privacy aspect of Starfleet International are they're applied to all organizations worldwide, especially international organizations like ours, and so we have to be quite rigorous in those certifications. So that's for the best, but that's how that works. Commander Shamali says the Swart sequence. I think it was referring to the sequence in which I place the daily devotional episodes. Yes, I'm prepared to accept that as a nomenclature, the Swart sequence, because again, there is no definitive chronological order for all the episodes of Star Trek. There are lots of different approaches, and even within any given approach, there are different rules that you might apply to decide how certain episodes are sequenced, especially some of the odd ones that are that don't seem to fit properly into the chronological sequence. I could talk about that for an hour. I'm not going to. I'm going to stop there. But yes, the SWAT sequence, I accept. Commander Shivali says the Klingon course is really great. That's on Duolingo. And there's other science fiction and fantasy literature. Yes, there is. For example, Captain Christopher Pike's favorite movie is The Day the Earth Stood Still. So that at least exists. I wish I could say that Captain Proton exists, but that seems to be limited. That's fictional even within the Star Trek universe. So that doesn't exist in our world. But I'm sure there are other science fiction and fantasy franchises like that we could watch. Master Chief Kotza says, wonder if someone from the science department can get hold of people at NASA. It wouldn't surprise me if there have been NASA speakers at the Soul Speaker series from Starfleet Sciences. But if you're talking about the science department of the Dauntless, you yourself, Master Chief, are a member of the science department. So if there's something that you would like to talk to people at NASA about, I encourage you to do that. Your idea, your project. Or at ESA or Roscos. Yes, by all means, feel free to reach out to people at any of those space agencies and ask them any questions you feel so inclined to do so. As a member of the Dauntless Science Department, that is your imperative. All right, I'm not seeing any questions on YouTube, so I think that is going to be it for the day. Let me just finish with a little closing statement. So I'd like to remind us that the Science Department is crucial in fulfilling the mission of the USS Dauntless to promote Star Trek and its values. Studying Star Trek, both as an entertainment and as a potential roadmap for the future, is vital to the existence of the Dauntless as an organization, because only through knowing the canon ourselves can we hope to inspire others. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out. The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes